England and France are embroiled in the 100 Years' War. Now, in this very short scene, the Duke of Exeter, who's Henry's uncle, is relating a scene from the battlefield of Agincourt. Exeter is describing a wounded and dying Duke of York lying down beside his beloved cousin, the Earl of Suffolk. In which array brave soldier doth he lie, larding the plain, and by his bloody side yokefellow to his honour owing wounds, the noble Earl of Suffolk also lies. Suffolk first died, and York, all haggled over, comes to him, where in gore he lay and steeped, and takes him by the beard, kisses the gashes that bloodily did yawn upon his face. He cries aloud, "Tarry, my cousin Suffolk, my soul shall thine keep company to heaven. Tarry, sweet soul, for mine. Then fly abreast, as in this glorious and well-foughten field we kept together in our chivalry." Upon these words I came and cheered him up. He smiled me in the face and rocked me in his hand, and with a feeble gripe says, "Dear my lord, commend my service to my sovereign." So did he turn and over Suffolk's neck threw his wounded arm and kissed his lips, and so espoused to death. With blood he sealed a testament of noble ending love. Pretty and sweet manner of it forced those waters from me which I would have stopped. But I had not so much of man in me, and all my mother came into mine eyes and gave me up to tears. At that moment Exeter ceased to be a man capable of holding back his weeping sorrow. He became his mother through his eyes, and was given up to tears. And Exeter's telling of the story brings tears to Henry's eyes as well. Many things bring the spirit of the mother into us, giving us up to tears. How sad that we must compound the all too frequent occurrence with events of our own making, with preventable sorrows, if the nurture and care of our mothers could only influence our actions more. You know, nothing delights teenage children more than discovering faults and foibles in their parents. The most infamous example for my own dear tots occurred the first time we watched the movie Independence Day as a family. Now, if you haven't seen it, Independence Day is a fantastical science fiction yarn about aliens invading the Earth and nearly wiping out humanity. And in a climactic scene, Randy Quaid, a Vietnam veteran who claimed to have been abducted by aliens years before, finds himself flying the only jet left that can attack one of the alien craft and possibly reveal its weak spot for the rest of the humans to exploit. Now, throughout the movie, Quaid has shown himself to be a very loving but completely inept father of three. His drinking and erratic behavior have left his children desperate for stability and sanity in their lives. Left with only one missile and it has malfunctioned, Quaid aims his jet for the collision course with the alien ship. He radios back to headquarters and asks the soldier on the other end to tell his children that he loves them very much. He takes one last look at the photo of the kids on the control panel before him and steers his plane and himself into a cataclysmic explosion that saves the planet. Now, I've watched this damn movie about half a dozen times, and I cry like a baby every time that scene happens. Now, make no mistake, this film is melodrama at its best, completely unrealistic hokum. Regardless of how sappily sentimental I know it to be, the movie still makes me bawl. And although I tried my best to hide it, my kids saw me crying. Well, they thought that was just about the funniest thing they'd ever seen. And to this day, I still get ribbed about it, although now that they have their own children, I don't know if they will find it quite so hilarious. To me, this is just what dads do. They make whatever sacrifice is necessary to keep their children safe and to help them grow up healthy and strong. So trust me, I get Mother's Day. Even though the stereotypical man tries to keep from crying, at least in the presence of others, like mothers, we often give ourselves up to tears as well. In more recent times, I find myself saddened to the point of tears because of our societal attacks, particularly on mothers. I'm given to tears on a wide range of legislative fronts here in Michigan for the threats posed to current and future mothers. For instance, we start with the beginnings of motherhood. One becomes a mother, most of the time we hope, out of love. Love for another so strong that we want to establish the most powerful human bond possible with that person for the rest of our lives. And yet Michigan, like so many other states, continue to erect roadblocks to the legal recognition of many marriages. And at the root of these efforts is a fundamental misconception that somehow one's sexual orientation is a lifestyle choice. One semi-serious argument that refutes the claim that homosexuality is a choice asks the question, why would any sane person choose that lifestyle? With all of the discrimination, bigotry, bullying, and hatred that LGBT folk face, it can't be a choice. Because no one would choose to subject themselves to that treatment. I think the same can be said of mothers. What sane person would subject themselves to years of sleep deprivation, financial hardship, the eternal roller coaster of emotions, and the all too frequent heartaches caused by our nurturing children? Well, they certainly don't do it for flowers, a card, and lunch once a year. I believe people mother because, like LGBT folk, they are predisposed to loving and wanting to share that love with others. They mother because they care about something beyond themselves, even if giving that love means great sacrifice and hardship.
Good morning. You'll have to pardon me if I'm doing it just a little bit. Back in 2004, I remember here in Michigan, we voted into our state's constitution the definition of marriage being between one man and one woman. At the time, it didn't mean much to me. I was married to a man. But I was against that law all the same. It wasn't until years later that the full gravity of the Defense of Marriage Act of 1996 jumped into my thoughts, and I understood the full gravity of what that law change in Michigan meant. And again, as I grew and met the love of my life, now my wife, Jessie, there was a lot of thoughts that I had to go through with that. Understanding what our relationship was going to be defined as a couple here in Michigan and beyond in our country in general. And even more so, people beyond ourselves. In the most recent census, in Michigan alone, there were over 22,000 couples that registered on the census as married, but were households that were same-sex partners. Now that's in Michigan, a state where same-sex marriage is not even legal. So it it's only the tip of the iceberg as to how many families that this really affects. And as a mother, I'm forced to think about the fact that so many of the opponents of marriage equality are so prone to saying that it's about protecting the children. You know, they say that children deserve to be raised by a mother and a father, which is ridiculous because it totally negates parents that are by choice or by circumstance raising their children alone. But it also negates families where there are two loving parents that are raising children, either by biologically being their children or by choice being a parent to a child. Now, I'm forced to think, how are we protecting those children? And I guess that these are thoughts, among others, that often go through my mind when I think about marriage equality in this country.
For my part, I'm not very political, but I know that before Sasha, the thought of marrying anybody and waking up to them every morning was disgusting. And I hated it. So any love that can make me that drastically change my mind and decide to marry her and wake up to her every morning should be legal.
And trust me, she's seen me in the morning.
One time we visited my grandma in Moundsville, West Virginia. I was about 10. And a neighbor's dog had a litter of pups. Needless to say, I was smitten. The owner had already found homes for the bigger and stronger dogs in the litter and was going to take the others to the pound for who knows what future. Now, I was the youngest child and my master of getting my way. Needless to say, we returned home that Sunday with a half-German Shepherd, half-Collie mutt. And when given my choice, I picked the runt of the litter. Gus turned out to be a great dog. We grew up together. He was as friendly and loyal an animal as one could want in a pet. But as Gus aged, his hip dysplasia grew worse. We did what we could do, but in the end, there was no cure. And finally, his condition reached a point where the pain seemed nearly unbearable for my friend. So I took him to the vet and was with him through the end. I cried a lot that night. Not really for Gus, whose suffering was now ended, but for me as I was grieving my loss. But I've never regretted that choice, and have always been thankful that that option existed for me. I am given to tears, however, at the number of people trying to take away from mothers the most important choice they will have in their lives: when to have children. At the heart of the reproductive justice movement is a desire to make every child wanted and loved, and to eliminate all unwanted pregnancies through comprehensive sex education, family planning, and contraception. At the heart of this movement is the need to support men and women making choices.
Good morning. My name is Sarah Schulz. Jeff asked for some testimonials that were personal. So here goes. Andrew and I started dating when we were 17. When we were 18, we went to get to Planned Parenthood to get birth control together. On our own, by ourselves. We got married when we were 23, right after both of us graduated from Michigan State. Andrew worked while I went to grad school, and I worked while he went to grad school. We bought a house, we sold it, we moved to New York City, we learned to scuba dive, ride motorcycles, and travel the world together. We did all of this while our careers developed in the paths that we chose in the way that we wanted. It wasn't until we were 30 that we decided decided to have kids. And we did, on our own time, when it was right for us in our lives. So on this Mother's Day, I'm reflecting on how grateful I am that I was able to become a mother when I chose to and when it was best for me. I'm grateful because in the end, I suspect that it won't only be a good thing for me, but for my kids as well. Were it not for Planned Parenthood being there for us in the beginning, there's a high likelihood that our ability to plan our lives based on our priorities and passions wouldn't have been there. And our choices would have been greatly limited. So that's one reason that I care so much about reproductive justice. I want Ella and Danny, they're just 4 and 5 right now, to have the same ability, the same freedom that we had, that I had, to choose our own paths. And what frightens me is that there are laws being proposed here in Michigan and other states, laws being discussed at the federal level that would limit that ability. There are laws that would allow doctors to just not provide basic care just based on whatever they decide they morally object to. There are laws that put unnecessary and costly restrictions on essential family planning services. And these restrictions will certainly cause a lot of clinics to close. And that will make vital access to services and family planning needs not available potentially to my kids and to kids like them. And I'm especially worried about that, particularly for those who are poor or in rural areas. Additionally, many states are considering laws that would deem any fertilized egg a person and effectively ban any type of contraception. And along with it, just greatly diminish the basic ability to choose the very direction of our lives. This is a scary time for reproductive justice in the United States. And rights that women and men of the generation ahead of me who fought so much for, and I thank you for those of you who are here in this room, rights that I was born into and just took for granted that would always be there, they're in jeopardy today. And they may not always be there for my kids and the kids in the generation after me and the generation after them. So I wanted to provide this personal testimony for us to think about what we might do to recognize the urgency and to figure out how to act now.
Back in Pittsburgh, when my family moved to Churchill in the eastern suburbs, Ashley was only 1 year old and Tyler was, as they say, still just a gleam in my eye. We knew the Churchill School District was a good one, so we quickly checked that off our list of criteria for buying a house. What we ignored, however, was that the district was embroiled in a huge desegregation case, which eventually merged Churchill with other school districts and created the Woodland Hills School District. When our kids turned school age, many people with the financial means in our neighborhood had already moved their kids to private schools. But we welcomed the opportunity for our kids to grow up in a diverse environment, and so we supported the merged district. My former wife even served on the school board, and I served on a number of district-wide task forces and planning committees. And we created the Woodland Hills School Foundation to help raise money for various projects. Now, while I actually lacked the resources to send my kids to private schools, I was thrilled that they received the education that they did, both in academic subjects and in life, and I would never have made a different choice. My kids are better people for being exposed to others of different racial and cultural backgrounds, different ethnic and social economic groups, and different lifestyles. So even if money had been no object, I would have made the same decision to send my son and daughter to Woodland Hills. I particularly remember a day. It was late September or early October of 2000. Tyler was in 9th grade, and he came home all distraught. He was frustrated, and he wanted me to help him understand something that was happening in school that year. At lunchtime, friends that Tyler had known for years, his African-American friends, would no longer sit with him or talk with him the way they had before. He was hurt and frustrated and unsure whether he had done something to alienate these longtime friends. We sat down and had a long, straight talk about race and privilege. Fortunately, I was familiar with a book appropriately titled, "Why Are All the Black Kids Sitting Together in the Cafeteria?" This amazing book explains how many children at about that same age develop a need to find their own identity as a person of color or as an ethnic minority in a predominantly white society. The challenge for us is not only one of education, but one of being sensitive to people's needs. All people's needs. Needs that we can only understand through direct experience and contact.
I'm giving my testimony on why the state government, what the state government is doing with public education personally affects me. As you know, I have 4 young sons. Enough said, right? I'm just part of it is, it seems pretty obvious. It's a conversation I had a long time ago that always struck me. I was in 8th grade, and I was ready to be picked up, and another girl was waiting as well. And she started talking about how frustrated she was with math. And I nodded in understanding. Well, entirely not understanding, because my biggest problem was I was bored. And it was then that she revealed something no other girl had revealed to me. She was bored too. But then she went on and left me in the dust. She was disgusted because the math program was so far behind what she had been learning in Russia. She had learned this stuff in 1st or 2nd grade. I think she might have been exaggerating on that one, but she then declared that math should be taught younger. And if we Americans didn't get our act together, we would not be able to compete. That is, the success of our economy depended on our public education. Now, I never saw her again because I moved to Colorado that year. So I can get to talk more about her ideas. But I called to the attention the fact that now, many adults don't realize that kindergarten now is what we used to do in 1st grade. I certainly didn't know until my first was in kindergarten. Many don't realize that math and science can be taught at a very young age, even pre-literacy, and kids that are raised in environments where science is around them have a big advantage over other kids. Kids with access to computers at a very young age have even more advantages. And this is the kicker. I can't afford private schools, but I can teach my kids a lot of this because I have a very thorough education. My kids have access to computers and are exposed to science and math all the time. Others who can afford private schools don't need public funding. And if you want to cut yourself off from public education for religious reasons, you shouldn't be getting public funding anyway. That's your choice. I feel that public funding should go to public programs that anyone can be a part of, and that will give our kids a future. The future for my kids is better, not just for them in the public schools, but it's better if everyone is well educated, because our economic health is interdependent, including the retirees. We all do better if all kids have the kind of education that will not only allow them to succeed, but to make educated decisions in life. This week, 2 attempts to raise money for local schools were defeated. They were defeated by the slimmest margins. Only 10% bothered to show up. Only 100 to 200 votes separated success from defeat. You may or may not have voted. You may or may not have liked the particular proposals. For me, this was just more cuts to funding for public education. And in a political environment where the state seems determined to take more money from local communities and put it into private programs that cater to particular religious and wealthy interest groups, it's kind of scary. What's going on is like a reverse Robin Hood. Take to the poor and give to the rich. They already have started a pilot program down in Detroit, way down south where it doesn't matter to us. It's called the EAA, or the Educational Achievement Authority. And it took away local control of schools, took local money, resources, and buildings, and put them into a state-run program. This program might eventually be successful. It might work. But so far, it hasn't fixed the problems, and it has its own fiscal problems on top of that. But the State House has already passed a law to bring the EAA to the entire state. It's scary right now what they're doing in the state legislature. But today, on Mother's Day, I do have hope. And it actually comes out of the election on Tuesday, because there was a lot of discussion that followed this, and I got to be part of it. And voters are discussing the future of education. They're thinking about these things. They're actually starting to talk about these things. And even talking about joining together groups that don't entirely agree. And so I have hope. And so that's where I'm coming from.
I weep for my mother, gone now more than 15 years. But as long as I breathe, she lives here and here. I can't send her cards or buy her flowers anymore, but I can honor her memory. I'm through giving myself over to tears over her death. But I can shed those tears for other mothers that I can still help. So I weep for GLBT folk who continue to face discrimination and abrogated rights. I weep for the women losing control over their medical and family choices. And I weep for parents whose options for educating their children may be declining. So I remember my mom today. Now, I could drive to her grave and lay flowers on the grass, and in the quiet of that place, I could cry for that loss I still feel. But then I hear her voice. I hear the voice of all the mothers, and I hear them telling me, it's going to be all right. Have a good cry. And I feel that warming comfort of her tone and that nurturing hug of her arms. But then I hear them say, you can't do anything for me anymore. But you can help that other mother. The one who needs a friend, an ally, a supporter. So go help them. Let us honor the mothers in our lives today and every day.